Welcome to the Hard Truth Podcast. This is Jeremy Fouts, and as promised, this is a testimony from a young lady that I've had an opportunity to mentor for years and to watch her blossom and grow. It's exciting for me to host her on this podcast. The name of the podcast is going to be Treasures Through Adversity. And today we have the privilege of having Autumn Canterberry from Colorado, mother of 3 kids, and soon to be author. We're going to be talking about that, and then also motivational speaker. So she's the perfect testimony. I know I've did several podcasts lately about struggles in life. And the reason that that's important to me is so easy for people to see on social media. You know, people living the perfect life, and everybody seems that everything, their marriage is perfect. Their fitness is perfect. Everything is just going as planned. They have the right house. They have the right car. And the truth to be told, that's not the way most lives are, guys. We deal with struggles. We deal with adversity. And I can promise you, when you hear this testimony of Autumn today, you are definitely going to get teary-eyed. You're definitely going to recognize what she has fought through to become the lady that she is today, and is going to continue to blossom and make an influence and a difference in people's lives. So Autumn, it's truly a privilege and an honor to be with you. I know you have 3 wonderful kids. I know your oldest just got through listing and getting sworn into the Marine Corps. That's got to be a proud mom moment. And I know my oldest son is looking towards moving towards the military, and there's nothing greater than serving our country and providing freedom for all of us on a daily basis. So it's an honor and a privilege to have you on today, Autumn. And I cannot wait for my audience here at The Hard Truth to hear your testimony of adversity, but not only that, look at how you're turning those into treasures. So let's go. Autumn, let's just jump right into it. Why don't you give the audience a little bit of background and more on who you are? Obviously, we know you're from Colorado, one of my favorite states. And let's share with the audience how you've been able to overcome adversity and to continue to push to make a difference in others through your testimony.
Hey, Jeremy, it's a pleasure to be on today. And I've been here in Colorado. I was born here in Salida area, and my dad and my family were cattle ranchers and raised buffalo and the cowboy life. But we moved to New Mexico when I was 8 years old, and my dad was a farrier for the racetracks. That was a pretty awesome experience, being around all those awesome horses as a child. But unfortunately, when I turned 10, my mother had a horse accident and she was killed. And after that, my father had left the racetracks and we moved to a small ranching community in New Mexico. And then after that, my dad just kind of started to fall apart. And I was traded for a horse at the age of 13 and sent to Texas at a feedlot with this guy. And things went south there. And then, I ended up back in New Mexico, and my father had placed me in a homeless shelter at 14. So I stayed in a homeless shelter for about 6 to 9 months until they placed me in foster care. After that, I went through all kinds of trials and errors, with my education, obviously living most of my life without an education, and then found myself back in Colorado at 17 and met my husband for 20 years at 18 years old and became a rancher and a farmer on an organic farm and just proceeded to keep trying to prevail and overcome all those deep wounds inside. But what I didn't realize was that I was hiding a lot of it inside of me, putting on this fake facade of life, being married to a man and ranching and farming and having children, but it all started to surfacing to the top. And what started to really get me going backwards was the control, finding myself in the same patterns of abuse that I did not recognize were bad because I got so acclimated to them. And after 20 years of marriage, it started to crumble in a very dark way, going through so many trials and errors, trying to find out who I was inside. And so I started to really, really listen to your podcast, Jeremy, and become a part of, Core V and get my body healthy first, and then dig really deep, trying to figure out what are those things in life that we get adapted to that we can pull the good out of. And then that's when I started my journey. And today I made the choice to leave that marriage, that beautiful ranch farming community, the beautiful home, the vehicles, all of it, and start over to save myself and let my children know that you have to heal within to be your true self. And now today I'm more than halfway done with my high school education, and I started writing a book of my documentary of my life, and I enlisted in the National Guard, and I'm just going with those gifts that we find in life to prevail and overcome.
Okay, so Autumn, I'm going to ask you a question. I didn't plan on asking you this, but do you mind sharing how old you are?
I'm 40.
40 years old.
I just turned 40.
40-year-old. And the reason I asked that question is, majority of my audience is between 35 to 50. And I think so many times it's easy to kind of give up on life, especially when you become middle-aged. And to see you not only face the struggles and face the issues, but to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to move in the right direction. That's just pretty remarkable at 40-year-old of starting a new life and saying, you know what, I've addressed the issues, I've addressed the struggles, but it's not over there. I've got a God-given ability, and I'm going to use those abilities to go help other people. Maybe that's went through similar struggles, maybe not as bad as struggles. I mean, I've got to ask you a question. I know the audience may have missed this. Your father basically traded you for a horse and just gave you to another person. I mean, I think you said you was 13. Was you old enough to really understand, or was it one of those things where you just like, okay, I'm going to Texas?
No, I was not. I didn't understand a lot of the situation. I remember the old cowboy showed up with a truck and a trailer, and my dad made this deal with him, and he said, well, I can't pay you. And the man said, well, I'll take your daughter, she can clean for me and take care of the home front. And so I remember that day like it was yesterday, sitting in this old Ford pickup, scareder than scared. I learned fear at a very young age, and I didn't know how to release it. So I was really afraid looking out the window. I didn't say a word to him. I didn't mention that I went through some horrible physical abuse and was starved. I lived on horse feed, whatever I could find to eat. And well, anyway, this man gave me a soda pop and a candy bar, and I took it and I was like, thank you. But that's all I said. And so, no, I didn't understand where I was going. I just learned how to pull my core of survival to make it. And I learned for years, how to just survive. And then I hit a point where I had enough and I wanted to thrive. I wanted to be my best person I could be given any circumstance. And I just chose to find the good out of every situation in my life and use it for my advantage to survive through any type of adversity. And that's where, my book is called The Silent Gifts, is because I teach people how to pull those situations, those environments, those circumstances, and find the gift in anything to overcome your circumstance, to not give up, to not fall into the dark side of drugs, addictions, suicide thoughts, all of those situations that we fall into.
So you moved back from Texas and your dad put you in a homeless shelter, and you said you was there for about 8 or 9 months?
Yes, yeah. My dad came and picked me up because the man was actually trying to sexually abuse me, and I ran away. And I went to the cops, and the cops got a hold of my father, and he picked me up, and he didn't want to believe it. So my punishment was to sit on a cinder block for 3 months, and I wasn't allowed to eat or nothing except one time a day. Who knows when that time was? Well, the abuse got so bad that one day my dad just came up to me outside on the block and he said, I'm going to take you somewhere where you can get some help. And to me, I was like, that'll be great, just to get away from this situation. And so at 14, he took me to Albuquerque, New Mexico and dropped me off in a homeless shelter. And I've never seen him since.
And then in that homeless shelter, basically after 8 or 9 months, then they got you into foster care.
They did. Yep. The homeless shelter was a place for a lot of troubled kids. There was a lot of gangs and a lot of people that would beat me up on a daily basis. But my dad just kind of disappeared out of the system, and I'm not sure what happened through that, but then foster families started coming in and evaluating me, and I got to pick a foster home, and I lived with a beautiful African American family, and they took me to services every Sunday and tried to get me back into school and, tried to really pick me up from where I was. And I was so far behind in school. I didn't pay attention. I just started causing fights and, just getting into trouble all the time. And so I eventually dropped out of school at 15, 16, somewhere in there. I was just so far behind.
And then you found your way back to Colorado after that.
I did. My mother side of the family and my dad's, the Canterburys, all of them, they were all here, but I had not seen them since I was 8 years old when my father moved us to New Mexico, and then foster care and all that. I lost, any type of contact with anybody, and my father kept us away from contact to family, so they never knew where any of us were. So I went on People Search and I found my mom's brother, and my uncle drove all the way up there and met my foster family, and he said, why don't you come back home? And I was like, absolutely, so I came back to Colorado at 17 and a half, somewhere in there, and tried to go back to high school again. But I was so far behind, on credits and academically and all of it. I just did not understand, anything. So I dropped out and got myself a job and just figured I'll be a rancher, a farmer, and I'll go back to my roots and I'll be fine that way.
Right. And so how about your book? Now let's talk about your book. I know you're working on your book right now. You've got an editor in California that's going to be, looking through it and then publishing the book. And the name of it, again, as you mentioned, The Silent Gifts. I want the audience to definitely stay tuned for when this book comes out, because I cannot wait to read it myself. And then I want them to read it too. And the reason I'm saying that is because so many of us have went through adversities and struggles in life. But I'll never forget when my grandma told me at 12-year-old, she goes, as bad as you think you have it, someone else would trade spots with you in 2 seconds. And I'll never forget that little quote that she told me. And anytime that I'm feeling sorry for myself, I remember that quote. I'm like, okay, somebody would love to have my issues that I think is so big in life. And I've never been traded for a horse. I've never had to sit on a cinder block days at a time with one meal. I've never had to go through half the struggles that you went through. So I guess I have a couple questions here. Number one, what inspired you to write this book? And then give us some little nuggets in the book that you think has not only been a good healing for you, but also to let other people know there is treasures going through adversity.
Well, you said it right away. I learned how to move forward because I always realized there was somebody who maybe be worse than I am. Regardless of my failures of pain, I realized no, there's more out there. But my purpose for my book actually started as a healing mechanism for myself because I knew deep down inside I needed to heal. And when I met you, Jeremy, when you started Core V, and I went to one of your shows, I listened to everything you said and I wrote it down, each step you took for becoming the best of your core. And so when I came home to that farm, I was sitting on the tractor and I just said, I'm going to start writing. I'm going to do the self-authoring, thing that people do. And I started writing down to visualize what I had went through, the patterns that I was going through, and then kind of letting it out, my own therapy. And then that's when everything started to unfold. I started to lose friends. I started to, have a lot of judgment. I started to get a lot of rejection. People that I thought were there really weren't. They were angry because I was trying to succeed. And so I had to make a deep, deep choice of I keep the things I'm comfortable with, this life, this environment, or do I sacrifice it to save myself? And that's when the process happened. And I would write and write and write. And then when I started to publish my book, I went through the divorce and my ex-husband was angry about it and he threw me in rehab. And I went into rehab, because he thought I needed to get over a lot of mental problems. And then he took my book and he gave it to the judge and used it against me, saying that I was very mentally ill. And he took my children away for 3 months. And so I went on, this, I gotta make it now. And I took the book off the shelf and I didn't sell no more. And I fought for everything in my roots to get my children back. And that's when I started writing and rewriting my book even more. And so my book really talks about from the beginning of my childhood to today. And it brings in all of my adversity and the silent pieces that I found to get through them and overcome them. And then in the end of my book, I have a system, a pattern that people can use that I used and implemented in my life to help other people go through their situations. And maybe that will, help them see that there is hope. There's no end until there's an end,
Yes.
And so that's what my book is really about. But it's also a story too. I put a lot of characters in it. You can go into my history of me living at the Buffalo Ranch and how the horses were always a healing part in my life. Even if my mom died from the horse, I still learned how the patterns of horses worked. And I followed that because that was what I was adapted to. That was what I was used to. And so people can use their environment around them to pull something good out of that, the soil and the dirt, all of it. They can figure out a way to heal through the process that they're living in.
That's powerful, Autumn. And one of the things that I've loved about agriculture, it's always been a place for me to heal as well. You knew I grew up on a farm and we had that ranch there in Colorado for a lot of years. And I totally understand where you're coming from. It's always been a place for me too, from a healing standpoint. I know that's the question I was going to have is how is horses, a way for you to heal with knowing that your mom lost her life from horses, but you did a good job explaining that. And in this book, when is the timeline? Are you thinking about when the book will come out? You think about 6 months or a year, or I didn't know how far the process has become?
I'm almost halfway done on the book. So my initial goal is before I head off to basic training in July. So give or take a couple more months, but it's working. I'm moving fast on it.
That's awesome. And so where are you at on finishing up your GED? Are you finished with that?
Well, I am halfway done. I just passed my social studies section yesterday. Above score, more than I realized. I finished the language part. I only have math and science to do. And so that should be totally finished by next month. And then I'm studying for the ASVAB as we speak. I have my book so that I can pass the ASVAB as well. So right now I'm just in school. I'm just learning like crazy.
Autumn, that is amazing. I mean, going through what you've went through and to say, you know what, at 40-year-old, life is not over. It's just now beginning. And to watch you still be the best mother to those 3 kids, to watch you still push yourself, and I know you from a personal standpoint, you're not just writing a book to profit. You're writing a book to make an impact in other people's lives, to basically say, no matter what adversity you're going through, there is treasures. And I love the name of your book, The Silent Gifts. And it's hard for me to understand. I mean, I'm just being very transparent, how someone can go through what you went through and not hold so much bitterness. But we know that when you hold that bitterness, you don't heal and you don't become the person that God intended you to be. So I cannot wait to continue to watch your journey. You have an audience in the Hard Truth podcast audience that will support you 100%. And I cannot wait to see this book come out, to watch you on stages, sharing your testimony more and making an impact in people's lives. So thank you for being on with us today on the Hard Truth podcast. In leaving, I always ask the guests that come on is what is one hard truth fact that you can leave the audience today? And then after you do that, I want you to share with people maybe an email address, or I know you don't do a lot of Instagram, but maybe a way for you to be able to engage with the audience that maybe want to reach out to you based on the testimony you shared today.
Sure. Yeah. So the hard truth about all of that I've told you guys today is leadership is a key. And when we lack a good leader in our lives, we're going to always naturally seek out a good leader. And sometimes you have to find that leader in places that are uncomfortable. Finding a leader is the key. And then once you find that leader, then the second step is believing that whatever you believe in, the Lord, any kind of religion, any faith, any type of core belief in your soul, then you trust in that to guide you to the next steps, because life has a funny way of leading us to a good leadership. If you seek it, you will find it. And that's what led me to where I'm at. I had to give up bad leaders to find good leadership. If you want to know any more information about me and find out sort of my path of how I heal, you can reach me at my email address, all lowercase AUSTARR 1022@gmail.com, or you can leave me a message on Instagram. I do not get on it very often, but I'm learning how to do that stuff. So you can reach me on Instagram, Autumn Canterberry, and I'd love to talk to you people more.
Awesome, Autumn. We'll put that Instagram handle and your email address in the notes for the podcast as well. So if you didn't have a chance to write that down, audience, just feel free to go to the notes on the podcast and we'll put that in there. Autumn, it has been a privilege having you on the podcast today. And, it's one of those things that obviously it's easy for me to be sympathetic to the journey that has been chosen for you, but it's also so inspiring for me to watch someone that has went through those struggles say, you know what, this is what has been dealt with me. This is my story, but you know what? I'm going to have pride in my story, and it's helped, mold me and make me into the individual that I am today. So I cannot wait to get my hands on the Silent Gifts book by Autumn Canterbury. And thank you so much for being on the Hard Truth podcast and sharing your heart today.
Thank you, Jeremy, so much.
Thank you guys for joining the Hard Truth podcast again. As we always do, share with your friends and family the podcast. We are growing very, very fast here at the Hard Truth podcast because we share the truth about struggles in life and give you answers on what you need to do to be the best version of you. Thank you guys. Have a good day.